Ja, lep pozdrav še z moje strani. Vi ste tudi, če vas naftaline vzamejo, pa vas prosijo za moderatorstvo, tako sedite, da sedim, kar naredim z velikim veseljem. Zna se zato, ker imamo pred seboj kolegico, ki je, lahko rečemo, špica pri raziskovanju nacističnega časa nacionalsocializma. In dovoljte mi, da jo najprej v slovenščini, ker v nemščini oziroma angleščini ne pozna, kratko predstavim. Gre za, kot se lahko reče, geborene Deutsche, torej rojeno Nemko, ki je trenutno oberassistentin, jaz se povečujem, da to nemški rečem, ker ne vem, kaj to pomeni. Mi namreč nimamo oberassistenta kot naziva na Züriški univerzi. Sicer pa tudi je dala svojo biografijo CV, ki je pa taka, da če bi sam tole prebral, bomo že dosti celo manjeti. Skratka, ni da ni, bila je v Bernu, bila je v Hanovru, bila je v Celovcu, gostujoča predavateljica po celem svetu, Kolumbiji in tako naprej, univerzi Kolumbija. In tako da dejansko gre za špico. Liebe Kollegen, herzlich willkommen. Erstes einmal. Zweitens, ich habe gerade gesagt, dass Sie eine Spitze sind in der Forschung von der Nazi-Herrschaft und der Nazi-Regime. Und Sie waren überall in Europa und auch in den Staaten als Gastvortragende, als Forscher. Aber letzten Endes sind Sie gekommen als Oberassistentin in der Universität Zürich. Ich habe auch erwähnt, Oberassistent ist bei uns nicht bekannt, weil der Titel haben wir nicht. Müsste sein etwas zwischen Assistentin und Dozentin. Dozentin. Okay. Freut mich. Nebenan muss ich erwähnen, als ich Ihre Bücher gekriegt habe, die Schwierigkeiten, wie Sie wissen, aber das war eine Postschwierigkeit, habe ich gesagt, naja, ich habe auch in meinem akademischen Leben ab und zu was Dickeres geschrieben, aber so dick, 1400 und was Seiten, habe ich noch nie geschrieben und ich glaube, ich war ja auch nicht das tun. Als ich gelesen habe, durchgeblättert, wenn ich ehrlich bin, habe ich zu einer Idee gekommen. Solche Bücher, breite Bücher, monumentale Bücher, wenn ich so sagen darf, schreibt man praktisch heute nicht mehr. Gott sei Dank gibt es verschiedene Leute wie Sie, die solche Sachen auch machen, weil Geschichte ist eine Geschichte und muss erörtert sein von Anfang bis Ende. Ihre zwei Bücher, Ihres Werk ist meiner Meinung nach ein Werk, der sehr durchgedacht ist. Methodologisch, terminologisch, strukturell und selbstverständlich inhaltlich. Sie sind brav gewesen. Sie haben auch nicht Angst gehabt, über die slowenische Geschichte, Kriegsgeschichte zu schreiben. Weil slowenische Geschichte ist nicht besonders anders als die anderen Teile in anderen Teilen Europas, sondern Die Leute beschäftigen sich oder haben sich beschäftigt mit der Kriegszeit, mit der Nazi-Herrschaft, mit der Okkupation und alles, was dazugehört. Viele Leute. Und diese vielen Leute haben ihre Werke normalerweise in slowenischer Sprache publiziert. So dass sicher auch für sie eine Barriere war. Also die Geschichte, die slowenische Geschichte, praktisch ohne slowenische Kenntnisse zu machen. Aber als ich gesehen habe, gibt es in der Buch viele Leute zitiert wurden, erwähnt wurden, die wirklich was über die Kriegszeitgeschichte wissen. Zwei von denen sitzen hier. Einer ist mein Kollege und Freund, Mr. Božo Repe, und der zweite ist Kollege und Freund Bojan Godeša. Gott sei Dank, ein bisschen Glück haben sie trotzdem gehabt, was die slowenische Kriegsgeschichte anbelangt. Wir haben gehabt einen sehr guten Forscher, sehr guter Professor auch, Professor Tone Ferenc, der fast alles, was er geschrieben hat, in den verschiedenen Sprachen bestimmt, aber auch in der deutschen Sprache der Fassung publiziert hat. So dass ein bisschen Erleichterung haben sie sicher gehabt. So, wir sind ein bisschen begrenzt. Eine Stunde haben wir insgesamt. Und deswegen schlage ich vor, dass Sie anfangen, dann kommt der Božo Godeša und dann der Božo Repe. Orientationszeit 15, höchstens 20 Minuten. Bitte sehr.
Danke sehr für die freundliche Vorstellung. Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to present my book to you today. I will give you an overview of the structure of the book and elaborate on selected results of my research. The book is divided into two parts. In the first part, I deal with the actors and the Nazi organization of the Reichskommissar für die Festigung deutschen Volkstums, or the Reich Commissioner for the Strengthening of Germandom, RKF in short, in person, Heinricha Himmlerja. In the second part, I examine the practices of the Völkische Politik in three political fields: expulsions and mass violence, including the mass murder of the Jewish population, the resettlement of the ethnic German groups, and the Germanization or selection of desirable inhabitants in the three annexed regions. My research questions were: how did the organization of Völkische Politik function? What power did the RKF have? Why were societal mobilization and participation so high in Germany and Austria? What differences and similarities existed in the three annexed regions in terms of inclusion and exclusion practices? What was the relationship between the Holocaust and the Völkische Politik? How did the Nazi regime define Germanness? And what practices of inclusion and exclusion emerged out of that? In the following, I would like to give you a brief overview of the Völkische Politik and the organization of the RKF. Finally, I would like to elaborate on some results of my research. So the original German wording of the decree from the 7th of October 1939, with which Hitler assigned Himmler as Reich Commissioner for the Strengthening of Germany, I quote in English. First, so this were the assignment, first the repatriation of those Germans and ethnic Germans abroad who are considered for final return to the Reich. Second, the elimination of the harmful influence of those parts of the population which are foreign to the German people and represent a danger to the German Reich and the people's community, Volksgemeinschaft. Third, the creation of new areas of German settlement by relocation, in particular by the settlement of Germans and ethnic Germans returning from abroad. In other words, Himmler controlled the relocation and settlement of the ethnic German groups, the related expulsion and deprivation of the undesirable locals, but also the political cleansing of the population in the annexed areas, as well as the racist and anti-Semitic persecution. Which were the annexed territories? In my definition, these were not Austria and the Sudetenland, but Western Poland, which was the Grube annexed, and Luxembourg, Lorraine, Alsace, and parts of Slovenia, which the German Reich had de facto annexed. In these areas, expulsions and forced displacements took place systematically. The undesirable population was systematically deprived of its land and real estate, and there was a determined policy of settlement as well as of Germanization based on selection processes. The total population of 12 million people in these three annexed regions was affected by the Völkische Policy. The consequences of the Völkische Policy during the Second World War were the expulsion of about 1.8 million Poles, Jews, French, and Slovenes, the resettlement of 1 million ethnic Germans from Eastern Europe to the Greater German Reich, of whom the RKF settled almost half during the war. The Germanization of about 4.7 million inhabitants in the three annexed regions. 6 million Poles and about 100,000 Slovenes, on the other hand, were excluded and given the disenfranchised status of protected citizenship. The Nazi regime declared the approximately 500,000 Jews in the three annexed regions, mostly living in Western Poland, stateless. They were deported, ghettoized, and ultimately murdered. I have brought you a few illustrations, maps, and photos so that you can also get an idea of some aspects of the Völkische Policy. Today I would like to show you especially some with references to Slovenia. This is a very early map, early considerations of the Nazi regime, probably by the Reich Ministry of the Interior in early April 41, about the division of Slovenia and the new borders. And of course, like all the Nazi thematic maps, it had some ethnic groups on the map. And here's a map from May 42. I came across this map in the digitized German captured records in the Russian archives. The two de facto annexed territories of Slovenia with a border drawn in red, for which a transit permit was required. And you can see Upper Carniola was a closed area. These are two pictures of two neighboring camps in Maribor. On the left, there's the prisoner of war camp, and on the right, the collective camp for Slovenian families deported to Serbia in the so-called first wave of expulsions in July 41. And this is also, the right one is also the picture on my book. This is an illustration of the Reich Security Main Office on expulsions from Western Poland. And here you can see the number of the expelled Poles and Jews from the western part of Poland. Here, these are the 4 different regions. These are the camps in between, and these are the regions and the general government where the people were expelled to. And the number is more than 400,000. And of course, the expelled Slovenes to Serbia and Croatia numbered, I figured out 19,000, but with the same number of people who fled to the mostly Italian-occupied region. This is an illustration, another illustration on the resettlement of ethnic Germans, or Volksdeutsche. And you can also see here, here's the ethnic Germans from Godeša, this you might know, I don't know. For me, I found it in the Nuremberg records. Also the pictures I showed to you. These are all documents from the Nuremberg, the records of the Nuremberg trials. And this is a Caesar order of the RKF, stating that unlawful entry into the apartment or house could be punished by this. Here more pictures. Also, all these pictures in the Nuremberg trial records are from a German. His name is Ernst Hitzfeld. It's here, written down. He took part in the expulsions, but after the war he handed over to the American allies all those pictures. And here you can see expulsions. Maybe this is the second wave and the third wave expulsions, the relocations of Slovenian families to Germany and Austria. And this is another map on the so-called Wiedereindeutschungsfähige Poles and Slovenes, means re-Germanizable, what the Nazi race and physical anthropologists figured out after bodily exterminations. Right? So the main findings of my research on the various aspects of Völkisch policy are the following. The population loss due to expulsions and forced resettlement was approximately the same in the 3 annexed regions, in the east, the west, and the southeast of the Greater German Reich, and ranged between 11 and 15%. However, the differences between the individual Gau areas of the respective regions were very high. Contrary to Götz-Ali's thesis, there was no causal connection between the murder of the Jewish population in the western parts of Poland and the settlement of ethnic Germans. But in the complexity of the entire policy of persecution and extermination, there were connections with Völkisch politics on various levels. So especially on the discursive level, in the four-grade space discourse, but also on the political, programmatic, and practical levels. The attempts of the Nazi regime to find an ambiguous criteria for the selection of the desirables, that is, of Germanness, failed in practice. Besides descent and race, it was above all the newly developed criterion of blood that the RKF apparatus made central in his theory, for it could use this criterion flexibly. In selection practice, however, the performance capability or Leistungsfähigkeit of a person and family was regularly decisive in the end. I argue that the Völkisch policy was the most important civilian project of the Nazi regime during the war. This is demonstrated by the large financial budget of the RKF, the large number of its employees, and the subordination of other Nazi political interests to those of Völkisch politics. Within the RKF apparatus, it was the principle of delegation that made the implementation of the Völkisch policy so efficient. The delegation of decision-making power to lower ranks, while the higher authorities assumed responsibility, created a great room for maneuver in the regions and on the ground. In the field of Völkisch policy, the various authorities, special agencies, party offices, etc. in the Nazi regime were characterized more by cooperation than by competition. The reason for this was the goal of making the annexed territories German. It was shared by all Nazi agencies and authorities. The commonly shared goals of Völkisch politics were based on this folk, race and space discourse, which was widely supported by German society, German and Austrian society, and led to a large mobilization of ordinary Germans and Austrians for the Nazi regime. The discourse guiding action centered on the promotion of the own and the exclusion of the other. In practice, Völkisch policy incorporated Prussian, German notions of space and nationality constructions, as well as also Habsburg ones. Elements were the revision of the Paris peace treaties, the unification of Germany and Austria, the reclamation of the ceded territories, the unification of all Germans, including the ethnic Germans, in one Reich, the construction of European Jews as foreigners and non-Europeans, eugenics, the alleged lack of space, etc. So there's much more to say, but I stop here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, hvala lepa. Bojan, izvoli.
Hvala lepa za besedo, Dušan. Hkrati se pa najprej zahvaljujem Bogu, da me ni vednost Nevi Alec in za tebi, Dušan, da sta me povabila na ta razgovor o taki ki moram seveda si že veliko ti najbolj stvari povedal, avtorica pa pač predstavlja svojega zornega toka, ampak knjiga je dejansko impresivna, ne samo na pogled zaradi debeline oziroma obsega, ampak je fascinantna tudi zaradi stvari, ki jih bom zdaj pojasnil, da ne bo izpadlo vse kot neki, da rečem, vljudnostna fraza izvenelo, ampak bom to skušal tudi, kar se da na kratko, ker me še spregane potrebovinite. Najprej bom izpostavil metodološko-konceptualno pristop avtorice, ki se mi zdi, da je naša pravo mero, ki kaže na kontinuiteto starejšimi deli, vendar jih hkrati nadgrajuje in posodablja ravno zato, ker ne samo terminološko uporablja sodobno terminologijo in tako naprej, ampak tudi konceptualno uporablja tudi družboslovne metode, vendar to, kar je pogosto sicer, jaz mislim, to negativna praksa, da prihaja do popolne dominacije sociološke metodologije, se popolnoma se zastavlja zgodovinopisje kot znanstveno disciplino in ga podreja, in tudi rezultati so temu ustrezno pogosto premalo natančni, če se zelo milo izražen. Predvsem se pa vidi tudi zaradi vsega, kako natančno, da obvodov in hitrih rezultatov ni, ki jih mogoče teoretični modeli ponujajo, že za priornimi rezultati in ne doseženi. Skratka, v tem pogledu se mi zdi to zelo pohvalno. Druga stvar pri tem je pa tudi ta, da gradi na kontinuiteti. Iz knjige razvidna najprej seveda celotna geneza tega problema, kako je bilo zdaj v zgodovinopisu, kar bi moglo veljati logično in samoumevno metodo, vendar se pogosto dogaja, da ravno v teh metodoloških konceptih prevladuje, da je treba vse iz nič na novo napisati in se vse staro popolnoma zapostavlja in tukaj nimam toliko pred očmi ideološke dimenzije, ki izhaja iz revizionizma, ki hoče vse, kar je bilo prej, zanikati kot verodostojno, ampak prav ta metodološki koncept, ki nekako zapostavlja dosedanja dela, ki seveda brez tega. Kratko uporablja tudi najbolj klasične pristope, skratka, impozantno število arhivov, ki jih našteva, skratka. Res je tudi v tem delu, ravno kar je v pogovoru povedala, da je bila potem pa težave pri izidu knjige, ker tako obsežniki neradi so knjigi, ki izdajajo. Seveda druga stvar, ki se mi pa tudi zelo pomembna, je pa izbira vsebine. Namreč teme nacionalsocializma, zlasti s takim pristopom, pravzaprav v sodobnem svetu se mi zdi, ne bom rekel tudi tam vse, ampak vendarle te trende pa že toliko spremljam, da lahko rečem, da ni v fokusu kot srednja tema. Vse druge teme so bolj pomembne kot drugo svetovne vojne teme in zlasti pa nacionalsocialistična problematika. Tudi v tem pogledu smatram, da gre za zelo hvalevredno izbiro avtorice, pri čemer bi še poudaril, da ni edina, da je pred kratkim tudi Lisbeth Macer, avstrijska kolegica, ki je zaposlena na Univerzi Ludvika Maksimiljana v Münchenu, izdala knjigo, ki nosi naslov Herrschaftssicherung in Grenzland, nacionalsocialistische Jugendmobilizierung in Besetzung Slovenije. Mimo gre tudi v Ljubljani na festivalu Zgodovina na Špici je predavala. Skratka, da bom rekel, da je to že trend, ampak vsekakor je hvalevredno, da se zdaj kar nekaj avtoric ukvarja s to problematiko in kar je še posebej važno, seveda tudi slovenskim prostorom, da je vključen. Tukaj moram reči, da seveda v Sloveniji dostkrat jamramo, kako nas nihče ne upošteva in tako naprej v različnih. Jaz nisem tako pesimističen, predvsem zaradi teh možnosti, ker je različne študije, ki jim dajo prednost komparacij v zadnjem času na različne načine tudi slovenskih prostorov, vendar pa iz tega vidika, kot je teh dveh delih, zlasti seveda avtorice, ki danes predstavlja knjigo, je redko. Pričemer, da je Kovačeva pobila Rosa, moram predstavljati, da tudi v Sloveniji pravzaprav je zanimanje za to in tudi poznavanje zelo, oziroma zelo bolj skromno kot ne, oziroma ne tako, kot bi bilo potrebno. Mimo glede, Dušan je menil Toneta Ferenca, ne, jaz pomenim, že Ferenc je v tem pisal, podaram pa ne Mitja Ferenc, njegov oče, ker večina pravzaprav za Toneta Ferenca še celo slišala. Še po nazoru z drugim primerom, Rafael Lenkin, mož, ki je polsko-judovskega lingvist, ki je skoval in temeljil vojni genocidu, že med vojno, v delu Axis During Occupied Europe, in po vojni je bilo to implementirano, sicer v nekoliko drugačni obliki tudi v deklaracijo Združenih narodov. V Sloveniji je komaj poznano, ampak v svojem delu, ki je šlo leta 1944, je on že med narodi, za katere je ocenil, da jih nacistični režim ima genocidne namene, jo vas na prvem mestu so bili Poljaki, tretji so bili pa Slovenci in Rusi. Skratka, že pred vojno so bili Slovenci uvrščeni v kategorijo tistih najbolj ogroženih narodov strani nacističnega režima. Vse take stvari pri nas so bom nam neko zapostavljene, ampak so jih druge teme, če že druga vojna, so vse druge teme v ospredju. Tako da jaz bi seveda na koncu bi samo še toliko dodal, da seveda verjamem, da je to preobsežno delo za prevod, ampak v kakšnih oblikah, kakšnih povzetkov pa bi veljali obrati v razmisel. Hvala lepa za to.
Hvala Bojan, lepa predstavitev, lepa osvetlitev, upam, da mi uspela malo prevesti, kot je Alexa se ima dobila, občutka, o čem si govoril. Božo, izvoli.
Hvala lepa. Frankly, we didn't much coordinate on this presentation. So you heard a large part of this what I wrote here, which is large because I really short. So first, the so-called Völkische Politik of the National Socialist regime directly affected tens of millions of people. You heard the numbers of these four occupied territories, but of course this is much larger context. And they were segregating according to a racial and political criteria, and according to estimates, they were destined for physical extermination, mostly in concentration camps, of course, forced labor, deportations, or a relatively small extent, Germanization. So the Nazi social order of the new Europe was complicated. This is just a part of it. Beside all these 106,000 pages is very complicated, and this is just a part of it. So the Nazi social order of the new Europe was complicated, and Europe was divided into occupation zones with very different status and subordinated regimes. According to Hitler's plan, Generalplan Ost, which was an essential part of this Völkische Politik, and the plan was drawn up in 1941-1942, so some 2-3 years after this Hitler's decree, which was mentioned here. About 31 million people were to be resettled in Siberia, which meant 80 to 85% Poles, 64% Ukrainians, 75% Belarusians, 50% Czechs, and so on. Tarch, of course, this Tarch part of Soviet population also, as you already heard, and I will skip this part. Generalplan Ost came closest to realization in 1942. It was based on this Adolf Hitler's Erlass zur Bestätigung des deutschen Volkstums, which was mentioned by Potterin. So the decree for consolidation of German nationality from October 7, 1933. By the autumn of 1942, Germany controlled the area from the Channel Islands to La Manche to Moscow, and from the northernmost point of Europe in Norway to South Greece, as well as North Africa. After the Battle of Stalingrad in the second half of 1942 and beginning of 1943, which was a major battle of the Eastern Front and turning point of the European theater of war. And after the Battle of El Alamein in November 1942, the German Völkische Politik began to shrink and adapt to the war conditions. Also in the central part of Europe, in the so-called annexation areas, it continued as circumstances permitted. So also in these three cases we heard about them. Well, I have to admit that this really profound study, I definitely agree with Dusan and Bojan, of course. In this profound study, Alexe Stiller provides a detailed introduction to research of Völkische Politik. I am also very pleased that she is dealing with Tone Ferrand here, because he wrote a large part he did a large part of research in this area, and unfortunately, more or less, we stayed there with these topics in his times. But I'm also pleased because she sheds light on the research of our long-time colleague and friend, Heinricha Himmlerja. He, by the way, left all his library to our department, and we respect him much. Well, further, she presents the activities of Dienststelle der Reichskommission für die Festigung deutschen Volkstums, as she presented here briefly. Office of the Reich Commissariat for the Consolidation of German Nationality, who took care of the promotion of German folks and cultural influence, and the extermination of expulsion of other ethnic groups in the occupied territories. This in the book is followed by presentation of other offices and agencies that took care of implementation of the Völkische Politik. So here, author goes into detail with the organization of the entire operation in the years from 1949 to 1945. And I mean this first schematically, because it's very clear presented how everything was organized, but also in terms of content, so she addresses both the central authorities and the administration in the occupied territories. It deals with planning for the expected, but then unoccupied South Tyrol. This is very interesting, because similar plans, for example, also exist for Prekmurje in Slovenia, which then came under Hungarians. And of course, Austria, after the Anschluss, West Poland, Alsace, Lorraine, and Slovenia. Alsace, Lorraine, and Slovenia are the most comparable, I think, according to the regime which was introduced here. This is also the topic tolerance, that with he made some comparisons with Alsace, Lorraine, and Slovenia. For historians, but also for the wider interest public, the treatment of basic concepts such as form, race, space, as well as the economic aspects of Völkische Politik is very interesting. We can trace how Völkische Politik dealt with nationalism, which arose from the well-known theory of that the German nation was above other nations, with racism, that is with the polyvalence of the alien race, and contempt for other nations. Anti-Semitism, anti-Slowenism, which was quite close, which is often forgotten, and so was the rejection of parliamentary democracy, the emphasis of rural traditionalism, the reference to ancient German mythology, and occultism. All of this intended to help create a unified German cultural identity. So Alexe Stiller's book is a challenging, deep read and very valuable text. Of course, it's not appropriate for, let's say, such discussions as we have here with public history and so on, because you need to read first and find people who will read 100,000 pages. In nowadays young generations is pretty optimistic, I guess. But anyway, this is basis on which we can create most approachable way to public who is interested in this, but it did not have time or interest for such profound reading. I will say to the end also this. The book is very topical. It's updated. Why? Because Völkische Politik is resurgent in Europe in various new forms that remind us of the early days of National Socialism. Unfortunately, its direct application can be seen today, on a daily basis, from those who were most affected by Nazi policies. Thank you.
Hvala, Božo. No, wenn wir schon über den Umfang von der beiden Bürger sprechen und Inhalte, würde ich sagen, die zwei Bücher sind eigentlich eine Art Lexikon. Eine Art Lexikon, weil es gibt so viele Daten, so viele Dokumente, so viele Bilder, so viele Mappen und so weiter. Also, wenn einer über völkische Politik was wissen will, dann soll Alexe Stiller Buch nehmen. Wir sind jetzt gerade in Zeit. Wir haben noch 15 Minuten Zeit. Und bitte, das Publikum. Izvolite, ćemo dobišno vprašanje. Pripombo.
I'm probably one of the few people here that actually skimmed through the book. I didn't read it, also because of my German. The book is too thick for me to read it with my German. Božo said a lot about reading this book in general. I think he's just jealous because you just been to the thickest book. Because Božo wrote a biography of Milan Kučan. And I think we waited at the time. And it was one of the biggest ones. But already Božo, and what I saw in this book, we know that this is just not just what I think you would say in German, Ballast, but it's full of content, and I like that. But I'm not gonna speak like Bojan and Božo did. I actually have two very specific questions from what I saw in your PowerPoint. And one of them is, I was fascinated by the map that you showed in the end about the expulsions of Swedes and Poles, this map, in Germany. So was there any particular reason why they would be sent to one particular area of Germany? Why that area? Was it because of the industry, because of agriculture, or something else? And another one is, for me personal, because I love the archives, and I couldn't help but notice a lot of these maps are from the US National Archives. You spoke about the photographs, and you said that they were given by the author to the Americans. But how did this document end up? How did this document end up in America?
Alexa, bitte sofort antworten, ja?
Okay. Yes, thank you for the question. Actually, these people, the Wiedereindeutschungsfähige or re-Germanizables, were mostly girls and young women. And from the age of 12 to like 22. And the Nazis needed young women in their households for like au pair girls, right? For the children, and they wanted to have re-Germanizable girls and young women in the German households, and mostly they came to SS households, actually. So this is where it is really complicated to figure out the numbers of these re-Germanizable people, and also there were also families, but not from Slovenia, mostly from Poland, re-Germanizable families, and they worked on farms. So, but in total, I would say this were like 35,000 people in total, and maybe 5,000 Slovenes. Not so many, but the selection process is interesting because these so-called re-Germanizables, they had no German ancestry, but they went through this racial anthropological examinations, but in the end it was also an economic interest, right? So this is what stands often behind racial politics in Nazi Germany is the economy in the end. So ideology and pragmatism always went hand in hand. And this is what I can show in my book, with the Völkische Politik. So, and the other question is also interesting was the NARA, the National Archives and Records Administration. And because, you know, this is a record group. Where do I have it? Here, record group 238. This is Nuremberg material, Nuremberg trials, and NO. What you see here, this NO signature means Nazi organization, and so all the researchers working in the Nuremberg trials, you know, I know that because I also did some research on the Nuremberg trials. I published 2 books on the Nuremberg trials. And so the researchers that went through the whole captured files of Nazi Germany. I mean, it was really a special moment for historians. Also now, you know, because we have all this material, we have all this record. I mean, so, and this, they pulled out some documents out of all these records from the different organizations, and so maybe it could be evidence material for the trial. So, and this is how all this material, and also Hitzfeld, because I guess he collected the material during the war and later gave it to the Allies.
Danke. Hvala. Izvoli, Božo.
I haven't read the book, but I saw some took very excellent presentations. But I would like to ask 2 questions. I don't know if they fit to the book. First is, how would you compare the German occupation of Slovenia in comparison with the other Central European countries like Czechoslovakia? First, and second, why the Germans didn't occupy Ljubljana, because in Leipzig there was a small or quite small German minority living before the end of the First World War. And second, why they expel or resettle German kočevars from Božo to other parts of Slovenia. Why didn't occupy? Because even at that time, Italy was a very weak ally of Germany.
Thank you very much for the questions. I mean, in the comparison, what I argue is that the policy in all the annexed territories was very different from the policies, the occupation policies in the occupied territories, like for example the general government, the central part of Poland, and but also very different to Czechia, because there the Nazis did not introduce a Germanization policy to Germanize the inhabitants. And I mean, in Lower Styria, they like Germanized, I don't know, 90% or 95% of the population, right? Not so many in aparata, but in Lower Styria. And also, as the Nazis did a total Germanization of the population in Alsace and Lorraine, especially in Lorraine after expulsions. They expelled a lot of French-speaking people from there. So this was a unique feature of the policy in the annexed territories, the Germanization and also the settlement of ethnic Germans in these territories. Of course, the Nazis also settled some ethnic Germans in the general government and also in the Czech lands or in Lithuania, but this was like a resettlement of ethnic Germans. They resettled from Lithuania and then they brought them back to this land, but not without a selection process, because this is what the Nazis always did. Also to Germans and Austrians, a selection. So, and this selection was also always based on descent, race, and economic interests, right? So in the comparison, as I said, the population loss was nearly the same in all the 3 annexed regions. And that was, for me, very astonishing, because always when it comes to Nazi research on Nazi history, there is this east-west comparison, it's always said that the occupation policy in the East was much more brutal than in the West. So, and I can show that the expulsions, not just the expulsions, right? We don't speak about mass murder. So when it comes to the expulsions, they were as strong in Lorraine as in the Warthegau in Western Poland. So, and also in Slovenia. So, and why did the Nazis not occupy Ljubljana? I don't know. Maybe you can answer this question.
No, se to je splošno vse skozi znano, to vprašanje pač lahko reče samo, da to je pač splošno znana informacija, ki ni prav konkretno predmet te knjige, no lahko reče samo to, da je pri delitvi celotnega ozemlja Jugoslavije sta bila Hitler in italijanska stran že od pred začetkom druge vojne, je pravzaprav Hitler pri predvidenja, po možni delitvi jugoslovanskega ozemlja prepuščal celotno Jugoslavijo, italijanski interesni sferi, kar se pa sicer ni tako uresničil, ampak zase, da rečem, za Hitler je samo on to naredil mariborski kraj, pravzaprav štarstvo. To so imeli pa za nacionalno ozemlje, ki mora biti vključeno v raj kot sprav v državo. Da so potem še zasedali Gorensko in tako naprej, je pravzaprav bilo še dodatno, ker je bila tudi bogata, drugače pa je bila že po strukturi in tudi metode, to so se res kolegica pogovarjala, so bile tudi razlike med delovanjem na Štajerskem in Gorenskem, so se predsej razlikovali, ne samo na zasedanem ozemlju, kar pa ni zdaj predmet posebne obravnave. Skratka, že to je vnaprej prepuščil italijanski strani, Kočevani so bili pa po enakem postopku, ker odnos do italijanske države, svojega zvezdnika, vemo tudi v kanalski dolini, iz našega prostora so bili že prej te optanti in pa seveda na Južnem Tirolskem je to bila po istem principu, skratka, ker je bila Italija zvezdniška država, cilj Nemcev pa je vsi Nemci v raj in to ozemlje je bilo že prej namenjeno Italiji in seveda so Kočevanje ne načrtno izvedeni, kar pa je seveda znana zgodba o Brežiškem da rečem, četrti val, ko so mogli ti Slovenci videti, da so naredili prostor za Kočevanje. No.
Zato, ker zakaj bi Nemčija kot močnejši partner darovala Ljubljano, ker je bilo nemško gledališče manjšina, so se kar tako odpovedali.
Tudi ti so se enako kot Kočevali, so tudi ljubljanski Nemci, mislim, da je bilo popis objavljen celo v jutru, koliko jih je obtiralo, mislim, da je čez 1000 ljubljanskih Nemcev tudi obtirali. To je predstave, ne vem, kakšno še žele, da nisem prepričal te, bi izrazil. Ne vem, če si natančno, kaj že izvedeti, ker so močnejši, vsem so bili zavezniki in so veljali, da ni samo moč veljala. Potem bi mogli tudi Južno Tirolsko zasesti po tej logiki kot... Ja, tako da to je sploh ni bilo v njihovem interesu. Vse sem povedal, njih je zanimala Štajerska in usporedno še Gorenska, in to skoraj bolj zaradi ekonomskih interesov kot tega najbolj osnovnega nacionalnega vizije, ki so hodili v prostoru. Tako da to je zdaj, ne vem, kaj še prečeti. Je pa res, da je že treba vse organizati, to se pravi, on je določil tudi razbitje, vse že pred vojno razbitje in tudi komu bo kaj pripada, skratka je sam, sploh ni imamo točno natančen podatek, ko je 20. aprila na Dunaj prišel Čano in so mi pokazali, kakšna bo razdelitev Jugoslavije in je hotel še nekaj komentirati in so mu tisti, ki so uradniki okoli, ki so pri Nemčki, smo rekli, da Hitler se je že odločil, sploh ne bomo nič več debatirali, so pomembah tako je, hočem reči, da je Hitler po lastni volji tako odločil in je kljub temu to, kar ti zagovarjaš, da je bilo še močnejši, da je bilo še zadev tudi Ljubljano, s temi razlogi, ker sem jih povedal, in so bili znani že tik pred začetkom vojne razgovor kjer se še ni vedel, kako bo šel razvoj čez 2 leta, vojna se še ni začela, Ampak so že govorili, kako mislijo interese na Balkanu, oziroma Jugoslaviji si razprediti. Kako že reči, Hitler to prepuščal v celoti Italiji. Pol v praksi ni bilo tako tudi. V bistvu NDH je bila najprej pravzaprav mišljena bolj kot italijanska interesna cona, pa se je pravzaprav več ali manj kljub delitvi interesnih con med italijansko, nemško pravzaprav, ampak uradna za politika Zagreba, ustaška, je bila bolj ali manj navezana na nacistične koncepte in interese. Tako da, to je zdaj...
Veš kaj, nekaj v Italiji je bila nemška Italija pa slovenska Italija. Nemška Italija to je center današnji. In tam so pred vojno se Nemci pripravljali, da bodo peticijo poslali, da veliko, da se zasede italski rudnik, je pri vojaško strateško pomembno, in so celo še neki diplomati videli nemški in so to gledali in potem se nič ni zgodilo.
No, ampak to je bilo del Italije že, to bi bil pa poseg napad Nemčije na zaveznico Italijo, si predstavljaš, to so pa malo tako, lahko da so bili gledati, ampak to je bilo del porbalskih pogodbi, del Italije, Indija.
Ja, tako da je reči, da bomo prišli.
To je malo nenavadno razmišljanje, ja, no sem to reči.
Hvala ti, Bojan, hvala Uroš. Darf ich ganz am Ende eine Frage stellen, eine terminologische Frage. Als ich vor vielen Jahren in Graz einmal einen Vortrag gehalten habe über die sogenannten Deutschen in Slowenien. Und ich habe verwendet immer wieder als Terminustechnikus Volksdeutsche. Und ich war attackiert wie Teufel. Warum? Volksdeutsch ist ein Terminus erfunden nur in Deutschland, in Nazi-Deutschland. Und auch Sie haben jetzt zwei Terminus genommen, eines als ethnische Deutsche, eines sind aber Volksdeutsche. Was ist ein Unterschied?
Ja, danke. Answer this in English, right?
Yeah. It's my preferred.
Yeah, okay. We can talk. Wir sprechen später miteinander. So, actually, when I use the term ethnic Germans, I always put it in parentheses, and also Volksdeutsche. I do the same, because Volksdeutsche is really a Nazi term. The Nazis invented that, and they invented the figure of the Volksdeutsche. And actually, this was the Volksdeutsche, or before it was the Auslandsdeutsche, and the figure of the Auslandsdeutsche was born after the end of the First World War, right? With the end of all the empires, the Austrian Empire, the German Empire, and then where all the German minority groups scattered all over Eastern Europe. So this was the invention of the Auslandsdeutsche, and later they divided the Auslandsdeutsche into two groups, the Reichdeutsche, Germans with citizenship, and Volksdeutsche, Germans without German citizenship or Austrian citizenship. So, and in the interwar period, because the international political regime of the interwar period had this focus on minority groups and protection of minorities, the German-speaking minorities in Europe were the largest minority in the interwar period. After that, the Ukrainians, and then the Jewish people. So the German, the functionaries of Germany in this nationality or minority congress, which were also in Geneva, where the League of Nations was. So it was really like a German organization, and they did a German, in the interwar period, and they did a protection policy for the Germans. So the whole minority politics in the the Germans and the Austrians, they wanted to create a united state, and the protection of the ethnic Germans were there, and everything, race theory, eugenics, everything was there. The Nazis invented nothing new. Everything was just there. And they could, they could just get all the Germans and Austrians into their hands, and they thought, yeah, great, now we are becoming great again and do everything. So this actually, in my sense, this was what happened there. And also the ethnic Germans, they were absolutely in favor of this policy. And I mean, yeah. And also what we know now, Nazi sympathizers were everywhere in Europe also, right? There were not only German-speaking Nazi sympathizers in Europe, they were like everywhere.
Okay, vielen Dank. Hvala lepa. Ura je cajt, so rekli, smo že čez rob prišli. Če še kakšno kratko vprašanje, izvolite. Pripomba, ne vidim. Torej, hvala lepa, Alexa, zlasti vam, hvala lepa. Vielen Dank, Alexa, für die Möglichkeit, dass wir die zwei Bücher mindestens so oberflächlich durchgeschaut haben. Alles Gute.